all gathered together. Who would have thought? Especially during such circumstances, it really comes to show just how important community is to one another, especially the creative arts. So I'd like to extend a big thank you to Sydney Festival, but also for their perseverance, but also to Janet Lawrence, wherever she is in the crowd, for her vision, enabling all of us to enjoy this beautiful, special place today. Above all, it's a great honour to be your host today for this talk, to be yarning with some extraordinary people with some exceptional stories and experiences. So I'd like to introduce to you all, starting from my right. This is Greg Mullins. He's an extraordinary, internationally recognised expert in responding to major bushfires and natural disasters, and has developed a keen interest in the linkages between climate change and extreme weather events. He coordinated the responses to many major natural disasters over more than 2 decades, and retired as the Commissioner of Fire and Rescue in New South Wales in 2017. Greg still works as a volunteer firefighter and is also the co-founder of Emergency Leaders for Climate Action. So, yes, amazing legacy. Then we have Fiona Lee. She is a bushfire survivor, a community development worker, visual artist, and mother. Fiona is currently completing a bushfire-affected artist residency at the Creator Incubator in New South Wales, where she lives with her family, and has travelled down from today, so thank you, Fiona. And she also volunteers for bushfire survivors for climate action, and she is dedicated to making the clear link between bushfires and climate change. Next is Jazz, the amazing Jazz Money. So Jazz, you are a poet, filmmaker, educator of Wiradjuri heritage, travelling down from the Boom Mountains to join us today, and on Gundagara and from the Darug Nations. And she specialises in storytelling, community collaboration, digital production, and working with First Nations artists to realise their digital projects. And finally, Kai Wild. Kai has actually travelled all the way down from Brisbane today to join us for this talk, so thank you so much, Kai. You're a climbing arborist, conservationist and wildlife rescue, and suffragette father to the orphan Joey, Kai. During the bushfires in January 2020, he participated in the rescue of more than 100 koalas. His debut book, The 99th Koala, was just released in November 2020 as well. And as for me, for those of you who I haven't had the chance to meet yet, my name is Lille Madden. I'm a proud Aboriginal woman, stemming all the way up from Arrernte country in Alice Springs, over to northeast on Kalkadoon country in Mount Isa, winding all the way down to Bundjalung country in northern New South Wales, where my grandmother is from here, and ending on Gadigal country, where my grandfather is from, on the Eora Nation. And that's who I'd like to pay my particular respects to today, and who also made it possible for a lot of other young and Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people to be here. So I pay my respects to all First Nations people. So right now, what I would like to ask of you all is to close your eyes for a moment. To think about the space that we are in now, and to reflect on the difference at this time last year. How do we mourn, and how do we remember? During such times that we are in presently, but also not to forget about the struggles during the fires, the energies and memories we still hold on to and carry with us. The fires that burned through land 2.5 times the size of Tasmania, more than 9 million hectares, killing or displacing more than 3 billion animals and affecting nearly 80% of Australians. This included the tragic loss of more than 45 lives from the fires and smoke. More than 3,000 homes were destroyed and thousands of other buildings. Not to mention the health implications caused from the smoke and trauma to the people worldwide and on the front lines. While unprecedented, this tragedy was not unforeseen nor unexpected. Where is the restitution for enormous, massive loss to country. Please open your eyes once more. When I think of the word country, it's such a broad definition, and it was one that we were kind of touching on the other day, Jazz, when we were having a yarn. Especially for blackfellas, I think everyone has a different definition. What, for you, the word country, what does that mean?
Thank you for that beautiful introduction. I just want to echo my gratitude to Gadigal for this beautiful country and the care that is embedded with it. I'm very grateful to be here.
Sorry, that's my old one.
Hello. Oh, it feels weird to have something so close in COVID times. So country, even just thinking, Gadigal country just then, when I think of it as a Wiradjuri woman, I think of country as the legacy that's been left to us from our ancestors, and that responsibility to country, which is not just the land that we walk on, though it is the land that we walk on, but it's also all the kin that we share that land with, the feathered and the finned and the furred, and all those that we have a responsibility to listen to and who speak to us as well. All country speaks. It's such a funny thing that I hear a lot of white fellas say, I think, which is like they go out bush and then they come back and they're like, I've been on country. And you're like, you're always, like if you're in this continent, you're on country and you're on someone's like sacred homelands that you have a responsibility to. Even if you're in an apartment in a high rise, you have a responsibility to all that nurtures you. So that's my definition of country and the one that my family practice, I think.
No, thank you, sis. Well, and I think it's, when we're talking about it and reflecting on it, it's also, that definition is that perspective of what has enabled us to continue to strive and continue to be one of the oldest living, cultural traditions in the world. And it's one that I wanted to ask you about too, Greg, because I know that your father was a firefighter, just like you, and you've been working on country for over 50 years now. You kind of know how fire lives, breathes, and acts. Would you mind touching on for us what was so different about the 2019 and the 2020 fires to anything that you've experienced before?
Yeah, where do I start? But look, these fires were just, the word unprecedented, it's a bit tired, but they were bigger, they were far more fierce and intense, and that's been a recent study, so the radiative power of the fires was way beyond anything that's ever been recorded, ever. The country that they covered, so 5.5 million hectares in New South Wales alone, 21% of eastern broadleaf forest compared to about 2% previously in a bad year, 11 times more homes lost than ever before, and actually number of smoke deaths is about 450. So nearly 500 people lost their lives directly, probably more. So it was just overwhelming, and what I and other people who've been in the firefighting business for a long time know is that it's driven by extreme weather. That extreme weather, there's no other explanation whatsoever. It's the increased amount of CO2 and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere driving the extreme weather. So 2019, the weather conditions, the fire danger conditions, never anything before. And I saw fire conditions. I've been around and fought fires in the US, I've studied fires in France, Spain, Canada, all over New South Wales for 50 years, and the fire intensity was just something I've never seen before. And actually, a couple of times I didn't think I'd make it home, which I didn't think I'd ever be in that position.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine the different circumstances that you were in this time last year. Yeah. No. And it's interesting, I was reading about Royal Commission and the foreword from Scott Morrison in his response, he starts off his response to the Royal Commission saying, the Black Summer, it was totally unprecedented, and this term Black Summer we hear so much, but for so many, this fires didn't start in the summer, in the springtime. I think it was around on the 8th, Fiona, in November 2019. Would you be open to letting us know what happened in Boban, where you're living?
Yeah. Hi. Thank you for acknowledging that term is really problematic and that fire seasons extend well beyond the summer period. So my family's home was located on Biripi country on the mid-coast of New South Wales. And on the 8th of November, there'd been a fire burning to the west of us in a national park, in a remote national park that was hard to access for some weeks. And November 8th was a severe fire-rated day, and we could see the fire coming. And living in a house with no phone reception in the bush, we hadn't received any kind of warnings, but having a bushfire survival plan and monitoring the Fires Near Me app told us that the fire was 17 kilometres away, when in fact we knew it wasn't, by the black billowing smoke over our house and the leaves dropping in our yard. And I have a 4-year-old daughter. My partner and I do. My partner's in the audience today, Helen. And we enacted our bushfire survival plan to ensure the safety of our daughter, and we left early, and I think it was about 4 hours later our house was gone. But it wasn't until we got into the area of phone reception that we realised how serious our situation was, because there was many members of the local community that we knew grouped there, trying to find their family. And so that's when everything changed.
And you said you have a lot of family from up that way, so it would have been checking in on all of them as well, I imagine?
Yeah, my partner's family is from there, yeah, for sure. And there's, complex and traumatic stories around, trying to find people in those situations where no one really knows what's going on, but we know it's really serious. Yeah.
And it was interesting during that time. Could you tell us a little bit about the government's response? And this was just the beginning of.
Yeah, I quite like this story because it's one I feel really passionate about. So November 8th, we lost our house, which was what I considered to be the first day of the bushfire crisis. I know fires were burning further north earlier than that, but it's sort of when it's really was started in the media. That day, I think 140 houses in the mid-coast area, the following days were lost, and it was that time when Gladys Berejiklian and Scott Morrison insisted that now wasn't the time to talk about climate change. Deputy Prime Minister Michael McCormack went as far as saying, any mention of climate change was disgusting, and the work of raving inner city lefties eager to prosecute some agenda. And as a person from the bush whose house had just burnt down, I was infuriated by all of those comments and compelled to be a voice for the people they were actually talking about, bushfire survivors. So our family went to the New South Wales State Parliament. There was a snap action there because the state government was considering removing climate change considerations from new mining approvals. So we took that opportunity to take the ashes of our house and declare that now is exactly the time to talk about climate change. Actually, it was decades ago, but so that was that.
Wow, yeah. To just find the strength to 3 days later be outside of New South Wales Parliament houses. Yeah, it's off. And it wasn't even just it became bigger and larger beyond any scale that we could have imagined, and continued on for many months to come. And Kai, that's when you hopped in your ute. Oh yeah, is it still? Oh no, it's not working. Yep.
Is it working? Can you hear me?
A little bit, maybe Jazz. Oh, is that? No, that's probably not. That's COVID safe. But well, you hopped in your ute in January, and you travelled 1,500 kilometres. Was it north, east, south, west from Sydney?
Yeah,
Can you answer why? Yeah, where were you going and why?
I mean, my involvement with the bushfires kind of began in September the following year, and yeah, just as like a community volunteer helping out in Highlands where friends' properties were being threatened by bushfire. Yeah, and then also helping out locally and also down south after the fires have been through places like Lake Conjola with the state emergency services, and yeah, actually it was the end of January when we were having a debrief at my local SES unit for the entire fire season, and yeah, just out of the blue, I got a message on Facebook from a wildlife carer that I'd helped in the past to release possums in Sydney. And she'd been contacted by a wildlife rescuer who'd come over from like Japan to help with the wildlife situation after the fires. It was on Kangaroo Island, and they just come across these koalas that weeks after the fires on Kangaroo Island, were still suffering from burns and starvation and were trapped in trees. And yeah, like that initial kind of fallout immediately after the fires, saw this remarkable response from individuals and wildlife organisations and even ADF reserves, and where people just went and scooped up all the wildlife and did everything they can, or everything they could. But I guess there was just like this, there's always gaps and grey areas, and one of those was just these koalas that were still in these trees that just couldn't be reached unless you could climb trees.
And the fires that started there, do you know a bit of background of how they kind of started, like on Kangaroo Island? Was that from a...
So that was from lightning strikes.
Yeah.
In the national park there.
And what was it like when you finally got there? Even though, you probably saw this thing on Facebook, didn't know too much information, you just drove out?
Yeah, I mean, I'd already been down south and kind of had that experience around Lake Conjola, and so it wasn't anything out of the ordinary by that point, but yeah, like nothing, yeah, you never get used to kind of just walking amongst like burnt koalas basically, yeah, and that's kind of, yeah, doing that every day for 7 weeks basically, just, yeah, gets to you.
Of course, and I couldn't imagine just your senses in terms of like, probably, you're probably feeling like, Greg, even just at the beginning of a fire coming up during also the aftermath and seeing these animals and the energy there, what do your senses do? Do they kind of, like, extend this question to everyone, they just switch off, yeah, you just get in that mindset of helping and...
I think so. I mean, what Greg and Bea touched on, like that, for me anyway, that experience of frustration during the fires where you just like, this is the moment where we expect our leaders to like be honest and accountable and accept reality and listen to experts, and that's what we all needed, and that's what we didn't happen, and that's why Greg was so bloody amazing that through that period, just having that leadership. Yeah, so in some ways, like, my experience on KI was just so shit, but being able to actually do something every day that was able to help something or someone and yeah, feel like you're actually achieving a goal every day as opposed to just sitting there wishing that there was better, greater leadership. so it's a funny dynamic. Yeah.
Definitely. And this is a question extended to you all in terms of, what did you find one of the hardest things was to deal with? Fee, was it like going back to your house after the fires ran through, or was it more, yes, safety first.
The hardest moment.
You also, yeah.
I was just trying to say I will cry, but I couldn't get it out. The hardest moment is I wrote it down. When I thought I'd lost the ability to keep my daughter safe, and my partner Aaron had just built her first bedroom and painted it all purple and had a light switch this high so she could turn it on and off, and I was just devastated that she had to endure these really tragic impacts of climate change, and that I felt that I couldn't keep her safe in both the present and in the future, and that was really the hardest thing.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing, Fee. Really
That's
appreciate
okay.
it.
I'm okay. It's just it is really hard knowing that what the future might look like should we continue along this path.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just to be able to, as you said, as you touched on, Greg, you've seen how fires have changed so dramatically in your time and from your father's day as well. Are you worried in terms of, your future generations, if they would like to, become a firefighter as well, what that would look like maybe in 20 to 30 years?
An even more dangerous job, but look, in that experience, I saw so many people. That was really hard for firefighters. Do what they do because they want to help people. On New Year's Eve in Bateman's Bay, we were just helpless. We were just powerless, and a lot of the time we were just trying to save our own lives. One of the things that really impacted me, and look, a bit of reveal. I suffer from PTSD, but it's under control, but it's back again because of that season, and that's okay, that'll be dealt with. But one of the things at Bateman's Bay was sitting by the side of the highway, and I looked, huge trees there when you go over the bridge and up the hill towards Mogo, and state emergency service buildings blazing, and big electrical store, and we're just watching it, going, what do we do now? And there was little black lumps on the side of the road a couple hundred metres away. I thought, oh, they are, and hay bales or something, and then a couple of them started to move. It was a mob of, mob of kangaroos. And they'd just been caught, and I've never seen that before, because they know how to get away. And we lost 1,500 homes that day, I think it was, along the south coast, and you can rebuild them, and a number of people lost their lives, but I just looked out over the forests. For as far as I could see, there wasn't a green leaf. And actually I remember, I can't remember who it was, I think he was a Wiradjuri man. He was talking about his totem animal and saying, wiped out, and you don't know what that means to us. They're gone. They're not coming back in our lifetime, and we've stuffed this planet. We've just filled it with poison, and the people in Canberra won't listen. And if good read The Carbon Club by Marianne Wilkinson, you'll understand exactly why they won't shift, because it's all about profit and money. And what a disgrace, what an utter disgrace and failure in leadership. So we'll trash this planet just so some old fat white guys can make big profit for the rest of their life. So that pisses me off, I'm sorry.
it takes a lot to even just to come here and share in these, you know, and in these, well, they're not even memories, they're moments, and they're still present here today, and that's why it's so important to reflect. And I think, you know, for me, watching this, and as you said, you know, there's these, a part of our culture, and, you know, Aboriginal culture, we have totems, we have these ways of caring for country, but it's all of our responsibility. And it was an interesting topic that we were touching on, me and Jazz, earlier in the week, and in terms of this kind of compounded grief, hey Jazz, in terms of like...
Yeah, to watch your country be stolen and then mismanaged to the point that, like, I'm crying from watching it.
Yeah.
Just to watch, like, your home... Sorry. So I wasn't on country, I wasn't like at home in Wiradjuri country when the fires were happening, but Wiradjuri country was burning, and where I live in the Blue Mountains was burning. And just to see something that's been mismanaged to the point that, like, the only way the country can communicate its trauma is such a huge display of pain and suffering. And you just want to, like, not only did the fucking settler government steal our country, it's then poisoned it and burnt it and destroyed it to this point that it's unrecognisable. And like where I'm from in Narrandera and around the southern Wiradjuri country and the Murrumbidgee, like it's all agricultural, it's mostly agricultural land, and you just know that like someone who knows how to manage fire should come through and burn that country right and bring it back. And that's not what we're getting. We're getting like negligence. Yeah.
And it even comes down to, you know, and one of the interesting things that I was hearing you speak about, Greg, on one of your podcasts that you did for the Good Weekend, and me and Ari were actually talking about it because I was so amazed when you touched on it, was these aerial rivers that you can be found along, you know, these environments above the treetops. Would you mind touching on those and like
yeah,
what
so
Jazz was talking
I'm not a
about?
scientist, but I've read a scientific paper months ago, and it was just the penny drop just blew me away. Now, basically, more water comes out of trees in the Amazon, the Blue Mountains, Daintree, than evaporation from oceans. So people assume that rain comes from oceans. Well, no, most of the world it doesn't. There's these huge rivers in the sky. But because we're just chopping down trees, and you know, one of the old approaches to farming was if it became infertile, we just chop down more trees over there. They're making the problem worse. So there's just no, and this is desperation, I suppose, and together with all the other retired fire chiefs, we just had to speak up because you've got this government who have no policies that will help with this. They're in denial, they tell lies, they've got proof of that from Freedom of Information, but they just keep dodging the absolute need to stop land clearing, to reduce emissions, to invest in, you know, a renewables-led recovery, not gas. Gas is poison, it's more poison, 86 times worse than CO2 in the first 10 years. But it's a great idea. Let's have a gas-fired recovery and we'll make all these people even more rich. So I've gone off track. I've gone a rant. But look, I suppose you can tell I'm angry. I've reflected, you know, and I was trying to interact with a minister from the federal government last week. He sent me a letter 2 days before a meeting with the ex-Queensland Commissioner and I, talking about what we discussed on the 10th of December. And it was posted on the 8th and dated on the 8th. That's how dumb the people who run this country are. And they think they can get away with this rubbish. So it's just lip service, and they're not fair dinkum. And they've got to be forced. We can't let COVID take our eye off the ball. And, you know, there's so many promises over the years to, you know, the First Nations people of Australia who built this country and kept it healthy. Where have they gone? You know, where have all those promises gone? So we've got to make them do something, because this is about survival, and I do worry about my grandkids. I don't worry about them, I fear for them.
And that's what's come, I think, most from this, isn't it? This kind of the power of community, even though, there's that kind of, I don't know how do you deal with the experiences in terms of feeling this weight and this sense of responsibility to, continue on. Where do you funnel all those emotions and those feelings and those energies and that anger? It's crazy, like, Kai, with your book with the 99th koala and coming out with something really positive, but also, telling people about what's happened. But time and time again, and seeing those koalas, how fluffy they were, you're like, there's the resilience in that, and is that where you kind of find hope? Big wordy question for you.
Questions. For me, what's the quote? There's
Action for antidote to despair.
there's action's the antidote to despair, and there's hope in action. I guess, for me, certainly the most kind of hopeful moments during Black Summer were being able to help in some way and be a part of something that was helpful, and to be able to apply my skills and knowledge and my privilege definitely into something constructive. But if I go back actually 10 years to when I kind of first started to understand about the impacts of climate change on wildlife and koalas in particular, and then I guess onto humans as well. I'm trying to say, basically that spurred on this direction towards activism, essentially climate activism, and that's what led me to become a climber, so I could become a better climbing activist and drop banners on buildings and protest and advocate for government and industry to do better and actually be accountable and try and prevent what we're seeing happening now, I guess. And there's been moments along the way where I've been involved in campaigns that have pushed banks to divest from fossil fuels, and it's just a matter of playing my part, doing what I could, which was dropping banners that had messages on, because I'm not very bloody hate public speaking, and that was a way to communicate with people, or you do what I could to be effective, and then other kind of being involved in campaigns that ended up seeing the New Zealand government move away from oil exploration and things like that, and my part was just a very small part. Getting arrested and using my privilege, basically, that meant I would receive lenience. But all of those experiences of kind of action have been really helpful, and I guess it's been interesting to see how that kind of has come full circle, where I was introduced to these ideas by being concerned about the impacts of climate change and deforestation on wildlife, which led me to kind of activism, which led me to become a climber, which led me to get involved with helping wildlife as a climber, which kind of led to Kangaroo Island, which led to being able to engage people and speak to people now, and advocate in this way, and then also to produce a book, which for me is basically just like an act of climate activism in a way, and communication. So that was all, I didn't see that coming, and but that's kind of hopeful.
And what has happened to little baby Kai?
What was it
What's he
about?
up to?
So she got rehabilitated 6 months or so, and
Back onto kangaroo?
released into the wild. So she because
Yeah,
the world
right.
again face a natural environment naturally. It's good.
No, I do, believe in that quote. Action is the antidote, and like it can come in many forms. Also, some quite beautiful. Like I've heard your poem, Jazz, that you've written in response to the fires. Is it? It's a good moment now for Jazz to recite.
So when Lily and I were talking the other day, we were having a yarn about like responses to the fire, and I was talking about how where my home is, we had fire on 3 sides. We weren't in any particular danger, but that inability to even go outside because it was like there were days where it was 47 degrees and the air was full of black smoke, and it was just impossible. It was impossible to make sense of anything, and so I was really sad and just spending time inside sad. And I started watching heaps of basket making videos on YouTube because I just wanted to be like hanging out with an auntie making baskets, and I couldn't even walk down to the creek to collect grasses, and it was kind of making it worse, but it was also kind of comforting. And then I was like constantly refreshing the news cycle and opening the apps and trying to figure out where Scott Morrison was, and just in this like very chaotic headspace. Anyway, I wrote a poem about that time that I'm going to read for everyone. I hope that's okay. It's called How to Make a Basket. Time weaves a horizon of many strands. The end of the world was marked with beautiful light. We should have known. As megafires surrounded the city and our leaders lounged offshore on beach with shandy Hawaiian print, we marvelled. The orange air more brilliant and terrifying than an Instagram filter. Our skin glowed and glowed as the horizon, and we were together to watch it burn. Retying grass knots, again, again, again. The age of the idealised self didn't touch our fingertips. The sun hung heavy, angry near in a thick sky. We choked. Our photographs were perfect. We looked beautiful at the end of the world, and the content was fire. The lighting was golden, the lighting was lit. How predictable that the end of the world would be captured in a selfie. The sun gets hotter as it ages. We're dreaming of a cold young sun. When smoke hangs low over the city basin, it is a new town, another town, one wearing death as a halo, or else revealing itself as a place where wicked things can occur. This country is not bad, but bad things happen here. Here the smoke curl around the monuments, trying to reclaim this sovereign stone. We burn leaves to cleanse a place, but this, I wouldn't call this smoke a healing medicine. Willy wagtails are not nocturnal, but they will sing to the moon. I will call her Diri Diri. Follow to the end of the street and remember small fires in the gorge. Each one used to be safe. Each one that used to be a family. I climb underneath the ash. My country is beyond the horizon, all plains, all rivers. The edges can be crossed with care. You might say the language is harsh, but it is an ancient beauty that rolls and sings. And we're singing, we're singing. I wake to a woman wading through tall birds, heart-shaped leaves, with perfect breasts that hang long and heavy, scars along her chest. Her basket is safety. Everything worth holding in 2 hands has a perfect basket to respond. How to make a basket. First, you must begin with the grasses. First, you must tend the blades, the small sweet shoots. First, you must make healthy the soil. Care for this place. Tend with fire, carry the seeds. First, you must make the land dry. First, you must love your mother. What you care for will care for you. When you are ready, you will understand how to make a basket. I express myself better writing than I do when I'm talking.
No, both beautifully. And how does the country look up that way now? Is the Arrernte grown back so that you could potentially make a basket?
I heard someone describe the bush around our place as looking like it's going through puberty. Like everything is so green and furry and it's kind of awkward, but it's kind of like big things are just around the corner, you're gonna be okay. But it's still silent, right? Like you go out and it's like, where's all the song and conversation? There's still so much missing from that landscape, even though it looks like, I don't know, there's surface signs that things are all right, but there's something deeply wrong.
There's still some remnants, as you said, the sound and the ashes and things like that around. And Fiona, that's what you use in your work. Is that what you're mainly focusing on at the moment in your residency in New South Wales? Newcastle, sorry.
Ash? Yes, ash. So at the residency at the Creator Incubator in Newcastle, I'm making a body of work that uses the ash and rubble of my house, my family's house, to make clear again the link between bushfires and climate change. Again, to continue to use this experience to try and communicate the message that we need to take action on climate change ASAP.
Well, and it's quite, when I was looking into it, it's quite special because the residency was for people that had been affected by the fires. So, like, community coming together.
Yeah, it was the director, Braden Snape's initiative to give back to artists because, in times like this, we're usually one of the first to put up our hands to whatever it is, do a performance or donate a piece of artwork for an exhibition or auction or, something ticketed that people donate money to. So, yeah, it was a way of giving back. So it's a bushfire-affected artist residency. And through this residency, handling the remnants of my work on a day-to-day basis has actually surprisingly been really therapeutic. Someone called it exposure therapy, and yeah, it's working.
Yeah, it's pretty beautiful, to hear about your practices and then see also some amazing artists in this room as well and how they've kind of responded, and beautiful little little saplings. As Jazz said, it's all hitting, what is it? Puberty, yeah. It is really good and promising, and it's heartwarming to see the regrowth and everyone coming together. I wanted to take the conversation back to the government, surprisingly, and their response as well. One of in the foreword again with Scott Morrison with the bushfires, he says, where's the quote that I wanted to ask it? He says, many of the Royal Commission's recommendations identify what needs to be done, but not how it needs to be done. But I believe, I was thinking about this and I was like, but I think everyone in this room, everyone probably in Australia knows exactly what needs to be changed. And this is the question I wanted to extend to you, Greg, and for everyone to answer, where do we start? And
Look, the Royal Commission was in my view, the Prime Minister had been called out. He thought it was a get out of jail free card, because I've now got a Royal Commission coming, so we won't talk about that anymore. I think he got a shock because it was extremely strong on climate. The science is all there, the experts all spoke. And look, one of the things in there talked about 20 to 30 years, there's 20 to 30 years of warming locked in due to greenhouse gases already emitted. So natural disaster risks are going to intensify. There'll be less cyclones, but they'll be more intense. There'll be more floods, etc. There'll be more bushfires. And probably by 2050, that summer will be an average summer, and there'll be worse ones. And you'll get it. We didn't have an El Nino. That's the second bad fire season where there was no no El Nino. Never used to happen, it was impossible before because of so much hotter. But the Royal Commission said what happens after this period is reliant on emissions reduction, or it's whether we deeply cut emissions now and go to negative emissions, i.e. removing CO2 from the atmosphere. And if we don't, it's just going to become worse and worse. And the scientists, the climate scientists, are saying we don't know if the planet will be survivable by the end of the century. So there'll be places where you can't live anymore because it's too hot, and we won't be able to grow food. So that it's an emergency. Look, to his credit, I think Scott Morrison's trying to move, but the Nationals won't let him. And even the Nationals are even taking shots at the National Farmers Federation for daring to suggest net zero by 2030. So they've lost their way, but they're in a coalition with a Flat Earth Society, and there's not a lot of brain power there. Unfortunately, from what I've seen, and I don't like criticising individuals, and I won't name names, but there's some really weird stuff being said. So very clear what needs to be done. I think with Joe Biden, with other countries going net zero by 2050 and 2060, they won't buy our coal. We're going to be forced to shift.
And how about you, Fee? What do you think? First and foremost, what actions need to be taken to shift this change we want to see?
Like Greg, the federal government needs to commit to net zero emissions ASAP and get to negative zero and start to really draw down ASAP. And I feel like it's all of our responsibilities to pressure the government to do that in whatever way we can.
To keep up the pressure.
Land back, mostly land back. Replanting our bushlands, paying attention to our river systems, which have been so maligned, stopping the pesticides that are going in. I know the structural stuff, it has to come with the structural stuff, but we need to rehabilitate everything as well if we want to have any sort of semblance of a livable world, I think.
I have to say that Scott Morrison's career died in Hawaii, as far as I'm concerned. As someone who's... So did Captain Cook? As someone who's kind of found hope and a way forward through activism. And actually, I'm going to bring this back to koalas, but my experience on Kangaroo Island, where just this group of strangers from all different backgrounds and beliefs, came together just to get done what needed to be done to help out these furry friends of ours, and put differences aside. I've never seen that happen before, and that was an incredibly powerful experience to be a part of. And for me, it's just the koalas, have become a symbol for our failures to our natural environment, but also what could be, what we could achieve. And if you just replace, caring for, or include caring for other people, other cultures, and our natural environment, but with koalas, then I just don't see what's stopping us. Why you wouldn't just all get together and get done what needs to be done.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part. There's something, that change. What are they so worried about to create the change that we all need and that we're all asking for? I wanted to also use this time to extend the invitation for anyone else in the crowd who would like to ask any of you questions to follow on from what we've talked about. If there is anyone that would like to ask anyone of these amazing people a question.
Thank you so much. It's been empowering as well as carry it to everyone that would be great with your experience working with the politicians and so on. If a mass sort of movement of like school children, taking to the streets and going on school strikes, people like yourself aren't being listened to, what is the mechanism by which we can force change to happen, do you think?
Great. I'll just repeat that just so everyone can hear. What is the mechanism to create,
Given the school strikes,
and
all the money that Celeste, that million-person raid, there is this really. There's a lot of people very concerned, shared concerns for everyone here. So, what is the thing that is going to make the Nationals and whoever?
what is this thing that's going to make the Nationals and create this change that we all need?
Look, what's the date today? It's the 21st. Yesterday was the 20th of January, but this morning in America it was the 20th of January and something big happened. There was a change in the head of government over there and an executive order's been put in place to rejoin the Paris Accord. So what's that mean? We can change things via the ballot box. Now, they do listen. The politicians are listening. The Royal Commission came about because Morrison was embarrassed and even the state premiers were saying you're giving no leadership. So the news cycle affects them and, wow, we've had a bit of we're off the hook a bit. It's almost 100 days since the Royal Commission, so watch this space because they've done nothing about it. But we've got to keep them to account. If you normally vote Conservative, write letters, handwritten letters to your local member and say, I don't know if I can vote for you anymore. I might have to draw something on the ballot paper or something because I can't vote for the other mob. But let them know because it actually makes a difference. And one of the things